Hello and welcome back once again to the HR Social Hour Half Hour Podcast. This is episode 16. John and Wendy talk to Dan Cross. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Wendy. How are you, John?
I'm very well. I am so looking forward to this episode. It has been an absolute nightmare scheduling-wise of
Yes,
no
it
one's
has.
fault other than Mother Nature, but we don't talk about weather anymore on the show.
Nope.
We have had a great opportunity, though, in the last few weeks to attend a couple of conferences. And so, Wendy, I want to hear a little bit about South Dakota SHRM.
Yeah, I was out in Deadwood, which if you're going to come to South Dakota SHRM Conference, Deadwood is the place to go, second to Brookings, of course. We had a great time out there. The weather was beautiful, had some great speakers, learned a lot. I was really excited because I was leading the social media team. We had ended up with 4 people on the team that were able to be there. Got some blog posts out. We were tweeting, putting stuff out on Facebook. And I even had found 2 sponsors for us. So UltiPro and Kind Hub were both kind enough to provide some prizes for people who were tweeting and being a part of our social media, and also for our social media team. So I got to give them both a shout out. That was fantastic for them to give us a little extra oomph on that.
That's excellent.
So you were at DC SHRM, right?
I was. We had Nicole Bolena on a special episode a few weeks back, and she asked me to come up and attend if I had the opportunity, and I did. And we'll say weather-wise, it has been raining in the Mid-Atlantic for days and days and days. So the drive up, I live 100 miles from D.C., but it takes about 3 hours each way if you're lucky. And it was raining nonstop both ways, but the day was great because they were inside. They had a really nice facility right there in the district where they had the event. It was called Building the Future of HR, and
Nice.
got to see Nicole and got to hang out with previous guest Ann Tompkinson. Heard some really, really good speakers. Heard from the EEOC. Heard a great conversation about EQ, and then wrapped up the day with a couple called Tall Small Productions. The husband is 6'9", the wife is 5'2", and they are speaking. They do public speaking. They work with people and coach them on better writing and filler words. I loved them. They were very entertaining. They had people get up on stage and actually do body language and talked about how you portray yourself and all the time and what have you. So it was a really, really nice conference. They did a really great job, and I really enjoyed it. So kudos to them. Kudos to the folks with South Dakota SHRM and your sponsors.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot, though, and we need to get to our guest.
Yes.
I will say this is the first person, and it may be the only person that is going to be on the show that I have taken to a fireman's bar. So I'll let you make the introduction, and we'll get going from there.
All right. Well, I'm super excited to have Dan Cross on the show tonight. This is one of the few people that we're having on that I've actually met in person. So super stoked with that. Dan is the talent acquisition strategy manager for Capital One's retail and direct bank. He is particularly passionate about 2 things, basketball and human resources. Unfortunately, Dan was never drafted into the NBA, so he had to embrace a career in HR instead. Driven by data, Dan challenges conventional talent and people practices through the use of analytics, human-centered design, and agile methodologies. Dan, welcome to our show. And our first question to you is, what's in your glass?
Thank you very much for having me, Wendy and John. Very different than our time at the fireman bar, John. I am drinking water tonight. A combination of doing some yard work, playing some basketball actually, and was feeling a little dehydrated. So I actually have some water. Later on, I'll probably shift over one of my favorite beers, which is the Dogfish Head 90-minute IPA.
Nice.
There you go. Well,
nice.
I'm glad you were able to take a break from basketball. I find it fascinating that we talked about both your passions. I am curious, Dan. I know you didn't get into the NBA, but how did you decide to pursue a career in human resources?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm a bit of an oddball. I didn't fall into it. I didn't accidentally land there like a lot of folks that I've chatted with in the industry. I very intentionally, went to school for it at the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. After school, joined Capital One's HR rotation program, which is a 2.5-year leadership development experience where was able to jump around to a couple different parts of HR, and 7 years later, I've been there ever since, and just really love the field. I love everything about talent, really. Stemming from me playing basketball, I was never very talented myself, so needed to find ways to evaluate, assess, scout other players, really become knowledgeable about the game and the strategy, tactics there to even have a chance to compete. And, through that, just develop that love for talent, the development, recruiting, just everything about that. And, naturally landed in HR with all of that.
That's very cool. I did this to Anne, so I'll do it to you. I can
Sure.
I can hear a disrupt talk in there somewhere, comparing basketball scouting and talent recruiting. So there you go. Challenge.
I've written a blog about it, so I absolutely would love to disrupt some more about that there. I love it.
I think that would be really good. Dan, how have you seen recruiting and talent acquisition change during your career?
Yeah, well, one of my favorite things about it is that the focus on just experience overall has intensified. So very clearly, I think a lot of focus on candidate experience, and that's not anything too new. But what I've loved more recently has been that focus with new process, and more of that focus on the recruiter experience. So getting tools that can make recruiting easier, and then also thinking about the hiring manager experience. How are they kept up to date on those open roles on their team, and really just thinking through that. So overall, definitely experience, but love that it's branching out into the actual people using some of those tools, not just candidates there, even though that's really important.
You talked about why you got into HR and pursued it, and I can appreciate the fact, as somebody that fell into it, I always like talking to people that were cognizant of what was going on, knew what HR was, kind of from the outset. But what's your favorite component of your work? In other words, what keeps you excited about being in HR, and why that thing?
For me, it's something I do kind of off the side of my desk for my job, and something that's also been a big passion of mine just growing up, and always a big part of my life, and that's being an advocate for disability employment. So I was actually the co-founder, and I'm on the leadership team for our internal business resource group called Capabilities. And this is a group for people with disabilities, caregivers of those with disabilities, or allies and advocates like myself. And I coach for Special Olympics, and just being able to have that opportunity to help employ and empower people with disabilities is my kind of favorite part of what I do every day. And I think if I was held over the fire to say actually during my day job what that favorite part is, I think it's just connecting talent to that right opportunity. I'm really passionate about bringing people from the outside in, finding them those right positions, and then once they're in the organization, thinking about their mobility and their internal movement. And is the role they're in today the right role, or can they move on, gain a new experience somewhere else? And that's just what I really love about HR in general.
Wow, really cool. Yeah, I'd love to explore some more of your passion on the disability side. I think that would be really interesting. Maybe a different podcast.
Absolutely.
We just had a talk about that here in Brookings, and so they're actually getting ready to host a session on the invisible disabilities and the accommodations and working through those. So I'm excited to learn more. You were on SHRM's 30 Under 30 not too long ago, and you have been an active part of SHRM's Young Professional Advisory Council. So what advice would you give to someone getting ready to start their HR career?
Still so crazy to me that I was recognized in that way and able to be a part of YPAC, as we call it, that Young Professional Advisory Council for SHRM. My best advice, and what I'm always trying to give to students or young professionals, or really anyone trying to break into HR, is just the power of building that network and getting them past networking as gaining followers on Twitter or Instagram or connecting on LinkedIn, and really making meaningful connections. I actually point to relationships like I have with you guys, where we can joke around, send each other those things to just have a little bit of fun outside of work, right? But would also feel comfortable being able to call you guys and chat, talk through a problem I may be having at work or that you can be having that maybe I can learn from. And I think there's just a lot of power in that. And you also need those folks to be able to go to happy hour with afterwards too. So that power of the networking is definitely that big piece of advice I'd give anyone starting their career.
Awesome. Well, now it is time for everyone's favorite part of our show, the half-hour question connection.
I love it.
I know, it's awesome. So do you remember how you first connected with us?
Yes. I think both of you.
Whoa, wait a minute. Thank you. Nobody has said it. Yes, I love it.
Yay!
Sorry.
Next chat, I think, right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Yeah.
We don't always know the answer to the question either. So
we tend to get Twitter, so there's going to be continued conversation about how we tweak the question, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But I do remember, I would definitely say Next Chat as well, because I remember meeting you at the Next Chat happy hour, Sherman, DC. So
in real life, IRL.
In real life, a real life connection. Yay.
Love it.
Well, Dan, you started to talk about how you recommend for young professionals or people trying to get into HR or starting their careers, how important it is about networking. Talk to us a little bit about how networking's really helped in your own career and what's been really effective for you when it comes to networking.
So I gave away a little bit of the secret sauce with my earlier answer there. But I'll say, personally for me, in my 7 years at Capital One, I've moved 6 different times. Started in D.C., our McLean office, moved down to Richmond, Virginia, Wilmington, Delaware, San Francisco. I now work remotely from northeastern Pennsylvania from my home office here where I overlook a beautiful lake. Networking and getting out to local events in each of those spots, but also just having that network of folks where I would never have had the opportunity to actually just, pass them on the street or at an event or anything like that in social media has really just helped build that network, have some fun, like I mentioned, and just be folks that I can reach out to about opportunities or things I'm experiencing and just able to connect there.
So how do you enjoy giving back to the HR community?
Another thing I already, spoke about, but I think helping others break into the industry. I'm very active back at my alma mater, recruiting for next classes of the HR rotation program leadership development that I did at Capital One. Also just really open to helping mentor or do different relationships like that where giving them advice for different companies maybe they can look at that really value and respect HR in that sense and would be great places for them to start their careers or connecting them to other folks across my network that may have those opportunities for them. And that's really how I love giving back.
Who do you like to read or follow when it comes to gaining new HR insight, Dan?
Gosh, there's never really one. It's kind of what I'm feeling that week or just what's out on Twitter and what's popping out there, I guess. But I'll say lately I've been really into the ERE and SourceCon. Namely has been really great, pushing out some great content there, as well as HR open source. And I think that community vibe of people willing to share resources and really open up their different playbooks and things happening is just really fascinating to me as someone that loves to cross things over from the tech field. I love bringing Agile into HR, thinking through that methodology. So open source, pretty similarly, right? Like how do we bring that, help each other, and share resources across? Beyond that, I think if I could do some individual shout outs, I've always loved some of the content created by guys like Matt Charney, William Tincup, Tim Sackett, Robin Schooling, Don Burke, a few, obviously you two. Just really love being able to read different perspectives and get, all new experiences there.
What's your favorite movie, Dan?
No surprise, it's basketball related. I love Space Jam. I'm a Jordan kid.
Sorry.
And no, it's okay. It's okay because I'm also part of me. I know it's not like a critically acclaimed film or anything like that. Just it's one of those I could always just throw on and enjoy a few hours of time there.
Oh, it's a fun movie. It is.
It is.
Aren't they going to make a sequel, or is that still just scuttlebutt?
I hope not, because I heard it's going to be with LeBron James.
Yeah, that's
And
why.
I'm a LeBron James hater. You'll
Oh,
never catch Michael Jordan. So we'll see. We'll see.
How about your favorite musician or band?
This is another one, like the HR Insight question, like kind of changes with my mood. My favorite is hip hop. I've always loved A Tribe Called Quest back in the day. I grew up loving Eminem and even some of the recent stuff, Drake, Future, stuff like that. I'm really into.
favorite TV show?
The Office. Um, Gosh,
Classic.
I think I've
Well, the,
watched
the
it
U.S. or
probably
the U.K. version?
both. I've watched
Okay,
both.
okay,
The U.S. version is my favorite though.
okay.
Big Michael Scott fan. Love just every character in some way there.
So if you enjoy the British version of The Office, my husband and I have recently started watching The IT Crowd on Netflix.
Oh, it's a great
Yeah.
show.
Oh my gosh.
You just started? Okay.
We just
I've been watching. Yeah, it's
Well,
fantastic.
my husband. He's been binge watching it. He's showed me. I think we've watched the Ghost episode like 3 times, and every time I just roll on the floor. Oh
You're
my
not
God.
the first to mention that, so I guess I'll have to check it out now.
Yeah, it's a
So,
great show.
yeah, it's very funny, especially since you enjoyed the tech part of HR as well.
Right.
You'll appreciate that piece of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
I
Yeah.
have to dig kind of deep for my connection this week. I think I know somebody that worked on the art team at Space Jam, but I'm just not sure. I'm fairly sure because and it's funny because we went when we went to see a more recent movie. We saw Avengers, and
Yeah.
somebody was talking about, oh, you don't know anybody. How do you know anybody? I was like, well, I saw 3 names of people. I don't know them well, but I know who they are. I've met them. So like, oh
Right.
yeah, I know that person, and that person that was on the art team. So I have to dig a little deeper. I'm fairly sure I know at least one person that worked on Space Jam though, in the doing digital effects or as a animator of some type.
Right.
I will
Wow.
have to update that. Maybe I'll slot it into the show. Insert name here, but yeah,
Yeah.
I
we'll
love
see.
it.
So
I thought he would have had you stumped this week.
what about, obviously you mentioned it early on about basketball.
Yeah.
What else do you like to do outside of work?
Yeah, I'd say I haven't had a lot of time to do a lot of much else. I shared with you guys I'm getting married soon,
Yay.
so a lot of it has been planning and all of that. So it's been a wild ride there. But outside of that, outside of basketball and kind of coaching, playing whenever possible, I also dropped earlier on that I'm right on a lake. Absolutely love just getting out there, doing some kayaking, doing some fishing, and really just enjoying that.
I was waiting for you to
Awesome.
say something about the wedding because if you weren't, I was going to have to.
Yeah.
I was going to give it away.
You might
Just
get in
tremendous
trouble if you
news.
didn't mention it too.
I mentioned it. I mentioned it. Cross it off the checklist.
There you go. So Dan, if you weren't in HR, not in the NBA, what do you think you'd be doing professionally?
Gosh, I absolutely never would be in the NBA playing wise, but I do really love coaching and think, in a different life or even in a future one maybe here, would love to coach some college basketball and just do some different things there.
Oh, very fun. Very fun.
Well, Dan, I'm happy to say we survived any type of technical issues. We
Yes,
survived weather issues. We made it, my friend. You
that is
survived
amazing.
the conversation, the question connection. I cannot thank you enough. I know how busy things are, especially with this big life change coming up. Really appreciate you taking time with us tonight. And so this is your chance now to let listeners know how can they reach you, how should they find you out there on the out on the internet.
Love making those deeper connections on LinkedIn, but out there on Twitter at crossover HR and on Instagram at Dan Crossover. I'll say my Instagram is a little less HR heavy. You'll see a little bit more wedding, obviously. You'll see a little bit more basketball, some personal stuff. I'll still be posting pictures, videos, all of that from conferences and things of that nature. Have a new-ish blog out on Medium. I do a lot more guest contributions and things like that in my blogging. But I am out on Medium, so it's just medium.com/crossover-HR.
We will make sure we add that to all the notes, and I wish I would say there's a well done site. That's what I would. Sorry, bad cooking joke, but but I will put the legit things out there. So
I gotcha.
I tried. Hey Wendy, how about you?
Joke.
How can our listeners?
That is a dad joke.
I'm going to edit all that out.
Oh, no.
So
I will
Wendy,
bring it up if you do.
Fair enough. How about you?
You can find me on Twitter. That is my favorite way to connect with people. I am Wendell93. That's WYNDALL93. You can also find me on my blog, mydailyjourney.com. Daily is D as in dog, AILEY. And you will also always find me on the fourth Sunday of the month on Twitter at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the HR Social Hour Twitter chat. How about you, John?
Wendy, before we get too far, we should mention that the latest chat, if you're listening to this episode when it releases, the chat will be Sunday night, May 27 at 7 p.m.
Yes.
And our conversation will be about employee engagement, appreciation. Get the questions out beforehand. We'll certainly have the questions at night. Realize as we're recording, because we're right at calendar these days, that's there. So make sure that you join us for that. But as far as for me, you can find me on Twitter. That's John, Jon_Thurmond, THURMOND. Happy to connect on LinkedIn. Continue to get invitations that are personalized, and I really do appreciate when you do that. If you have a question or comment about the show or the chat, you can send us an email, hrsocialhourpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook if you search the HR Social Hour. You'll find the show at hrsocialhourpodcast.podbean.com. We're on iTunes, Podbean, Podchaser, HR Podcasters, Google Play, and we've included now TuneIn, which apparently you can listen on Alexa. So I'm excited about that you can just say our name and apparently it'll start playing. Frightening where the times we're headed. But if you like what you hear, as I always ask, be sure to rate and review us, regardless of the platform you use. It helps us to continue to build the network and our visibility, and we appreciate it. So, again, Dan, thanks for joining us tonight for the HR Social Hour Half-Hour Podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Wendy. And as always, be sure to connect,
give back, and network.
Network.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.